welcome. You're watching Primetime Debate. Now, the Gujarat elections may have been dominated by sharp political rhetoric, especially in the last few days of campaign, but the results, whatever they may be, will be seen as a commentary on the famed Gujarat model. The reasons are many. An agitation based on reservation demands that boils down to a lack of jobs, a high-octane opposition campaign claiming development has come just for a few, and the question of farmer distress. Remember, the glitter of the Gujarat model is also one of the factors that propelled Narendra Modi from the state to the centre in 2014. So what are the factors that define the Gujarat model? To decipher this, I'm joined this evening by Professor R. Nagaraj from the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development and Research and Sebastian Morris, Professor at IIM Ahmedabad. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for speaking with us. I'm just going to start with a very basic question to both of you, and I will start with Mr. Morris. Is the Gujarat model really all it seems to be? And why has it come to the forefront in this election?
Well, there was quite a bit of an enamorment. I mean, the middle classes were quite enamored by this model because, some of the visible signs of development were there, like 24/7 power and good streets and, good roads. So these were very visible, and that's what kind of, entrapped the middle classes all over the country, and led to Mr. Modi's victory. But if you look at really what has happened now, is that the high growth which we had till about 11-12, thanks to the big upsurge in growth from 2003-4 to 2007-8, and then the global financial crisis struck us, but the government at that time, responded very well to that. And therefore, with a huge fiscal stimulus, which kind of lifted the growth back. I won't say to the original level of around 8.5, but maybe to around 8-7%, right up to 11-12. That has now collapsed to probably much lower than 5. I mean, much lower than 6.5, closer to 5, which is the real growth rate going around in India. And in Gujarat, it may have fallen further because, it's manufacturing based, and manufacturing has got a huge hit since 11-12. Perhaps even earlier, but certainly from 11-12 onwards. So that's one factor which has really hurt Gujarat very badly. The other thing I would think is that the agricultural growth, which was around 5% earlier, it was claimed to be 10, but it was clearly only 5, which was very good, but that happened because of good rainfall and the kind of one-shot effects of the Narmada and so on, has now petered off. And now probably the agricultural growth, despite good monsoon, due to the kind of awful central government policies, of not procuring on, not procuring at the so-called, procurement prices, allowing the market prices to fall well below the kind of support prices actually, has resulted in major agricultural disenchantment. Okay, so these are the two major factors on the growth which hurt, the common people here, but particularly the farmers. Okay. And also the middle classes who are looking up to, get jobs with the continuing growth. So the other third factor, which I may add, has come from a massive hit to the trading community, to the SMEs because of GST as well as the demonetization earlier. More the GST than earlier. Remember that quite a lot of incomes in Gujarat are generated by trading arbitrage, essentially tax avoidance and that sort of thing, given a nice nexus between producers and sellers. Now, what has happened is that part, has been kind of affected or rendered uncertain. And that has again hurt people here. Okay, so these I think are the major
Okay, that's, the last comment was very interesting when you talked about tax avoidance as part of the current model of business, and we'll come to more on that. But Professor Nagaraj, the reason why this has become such a question is because the Gujarat model has been feted as one that other states can follow and should perhaps adopt, especially from the early 2000s. They seem to be doing everything right. inviting in big corporates, making it an attractive investment destination, making it easier to acquire land, easier labor laws, and that is really what any big investor wants. So why has that now come to a stage where it's being questioned?
Yeah, I think the reasons for the most recent period, the slower growth and the problems with GST and demonetization, which Sebastian mentioned, are correct. But I think looking longer period, economists have shown, including myself, that Gujarat growth performance during the last decade, or if you take the entire period of over 20 years when BJP has been in power, has not been an exceptional period. In fact, there many studies have shown that Gujarat has always been one of the richest states in the country, and its growth rate has not been exceptionally different from many others. So that's a well-known fact. But what attracted a lot of attention of economists is that Gujarat's performance on social development has been just about average of the country, or in some respects probably less than average of the country. So that is what on which a number of economists who bother about human welfare have been criticizing the Gujarat model.
I want to come to some of the data we're showing. I want to come to some of the data we're showing and explain that this is data which Professor Nagaraj has compiled on specific parameters of electricity, infrastructure and roads in Gujarat over the last 2 decades. And if you could take us through that data and what you have inferred from it, Mr. Nagaraj.
Yeah, I looked at I looked at the infrastructure. As Sebastian also mentioned, the Gujarat was always known for a middle class person. Gujarat is always known as a place of excellent infrastructure. In fact, if you get down from the airport or the station, you'll come across, by and large, by Indian standards, excellent roads. And if you're traveling from major cities in Gujarat, again you'll find excellent roads, and that is what is attractive to common travelers, business people, and media reporters. But I recently looked at closely, is this what defines Gujarat model? So I looked at 3 things. One is electricity, roads, and ports, and tried to see whether Gujarat's performance during the last 2 decades or so has it been exceptional, or if Gujarat has grown at a faster rate than rest of the country, its share in all India should have gone up, or its ratio to all India should have gone up. So when I did simple calculation, I did not find in most of the cases. Here are some figures, and you have the figures here. If you look at my figure number 1, which shows per capita electricity consumption in Gujarat and all India, the ratio. This I have data from 91-92 to 2011-12. You can see.
Yeah, we have that up on our screens. Our viewers can see it. Our viewers can see it, Professor Nagaraj.
Okay, so you can see that after reaching a high figure of in 2004-05 or so, the ratio has steadily declined until 2011-12. And in 2011-12, it is roughly at the same level what it was in 91-92. So which means what? That in per capita terms, the electricity consumption in Gujarat has not improved vis-a-vis rest of India. Okay. Then I go to second graph, which shows the same ratio for domestic consumption. Because there was this scheme of Gujarat government last decade called Jyoti Gram Yojana, which was highly publicized, which was supposed to be made into an all-India scheme, which said that Gujarat provided electricity in rural areas on demand 24/7. And in fact, this was a major platform of 2004 election campaign. So if this were true, then one would have expected the consumption in Gujarat per capita should have gone up in relation to all India.
Okay.
And if you see my figure 2, you do not find that. If you see, it went up from the ratio went up from 2002 to 2007-8 or so, and then steadily declined until 2014-15. Which means what? That this model has not really increased Gujarat per capita agricultural consumption of electricity in domestic. Similarly, agriculture.
So we'll come to more details from your graph, but we get the big picture that when you compare it to the rest of India on a broader scale, it is perhaps not all that it seems. But then my question for you, Mr. Morris, is that one also has to see what other states have done, for example. And in that sense, I come back to the same point that Gujarat seems to have done what effectively business and industry would cheer. The question is that why hasn't it reached enough people for them now to be satisfied? Is that perhaps an example of trickle-down economics not working?
Yeah, that's rather simple. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello? Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me just go, dwell a bit on that. You see, when you consider Gujarat, remember it's not a country. It's a state. Okay? So Gujarat has always parked itself as that backyard in India where you can have two kinds of industries essentially. Highly polluting chemical, and capital intensive industries. Okay? And also these runaway 19th century industry. So it has had these kind of bimodal kind of industries. On the one hand, you have these very large infrastructure, petrochemicals and chemicals industries. Quite a bit of them are polluting. And on the other hand, you have, these runaway 19th century industries. So there's no doubt that it was an industrial hotbed. Okay. But the point is that has happened, much before.
All right, I seem to have lost Professor Sebastian Morris's line. I'm going to try and come back to him so that he finishes that very crucial point. But meanwhile, let me speak to Professor Nagaraj in a little more detail. Because you're right when you say, Professor Nagaraj, that the roads and the infrastructure is where Gujarat scores. But you are saying that your data shows that it's not all that it seemed when you were talking about agriculture.
Yeah, I see agriculture performance. Agriculture performance was very good during the first half of last decade, but it was basically a recovery from the decline it faced in the second half of the 1990s. So therefore, if you take a longer period, I don't have the graph with me in front of me, but if you take a longer period, then you find that Gujarat's agriculture performance has not improved at all over the 20-year period. So therefore, it remains what it was in the early 90s. So the notion that Gujarat has got into an agricultural revolution, I think it's simply not true. Am I making sense? Are you following? Hello?
Absolutely, we're following you very clearly. I just want to talk a bit about the employment issues as well, and I will give an opportunity to Professor Morris to finish that point before he got cut off because of a poor connection. Professor Morris, if we can come back to the employment issue, and I want to take this back to the context of the election campaign that has just ended. We have seen leaders come up who talk about reservation, and it seems to be all about caste issues, but at the end of it, this is a generation that is saying there is not enough employment. Now, where has that lacuna come from?
I'll agree, and I fully agree with some of the patidars and so on what their problem is. You see, it's something like this. For quite some time, okay, there a kind of a middle class has been emerging in Gujarat based on people who had done reasonably well in agriculture, not anymore wanting to continue with agriculture because that's become a losing business thanks to Government of India policies. Okay. Now, Therefore, they were all looking forward to migration to cities and finding jobs. Now, you may have heard of these stories of a single pan shop being held repeatedly by many people so that they can get a foothold in the city. So there are these vast numbers of middle class, lower level farmers and so on whose second generation, whose sons would now like to become employed people. And that's where the reservation pressure is coming from. So far, this pressure was not there because they either stayed and did petty businesses, okay, or the agriculture seemed to be doing well. But with support prices having gone, that's a major lacuna. Now, the other thing that I think Nagaraj said is very important, okay, that Gujarat's growth was even in the high period was not exceptional, but it was not so much the Gujarat model as was working, as much as Government of India at that time, which through its various policies, particularly the fiscal push which was put forward by Montague and company, which resulted in revival of growth post the global financial crisis. So we had mostly an uninterrupted growth all the way from 2003-04 right up to 11-12. And Gujarat, as one more of the big states, grew along with it. The only difference is that Gujarat could continue to have an unmitigated access to land and so on, largely for historical and geographical reasons. And that kind of made businesses feel as if here is an environment where they can continue.
Okay, I'll have to leave it there. But thank you so much, Professor Morris and Professor Nagaraj, for giving your perspective, a dispassionate set of views over there on the Gujarat model, on what has worked and what perhaps hasn't.